Hey everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and I'm going to do a short little video on flippers. And I've noticed over the past couple of months that not only are there more flipper knives being produced, which is to be expected given their increase in popularity, but also that the quality of the flipping action has gotten much better. If you watch videos on YouTube about flippers, especially custom flippers, you'll notice that the people that like these knives tend to fetishize the flipper, how it deploys, how well it works, that kind of thing. But what I've noticed is that, by and large, the difference between a custom and a production flipper doesn't really have anything to do with the action. There are a lot of other things that make a flipper nice, but in terms of how quickly it deploys and how smooth the action is, one of the best flippers I have, and I'll take these knives out of here so that we can focus, is this knife. This is the CRKT Jerry McGinnis designed tuition, and as you can see, that knife rockets out. It fires out. It's very difficult to get the knife to half deploy. It's a very big challenge. Not only is it quick to deploy, but it's very responsive. You know, there's a point here, and you can watch. There's a little bit of wiggle while it's in the detent position, and then once you overcome the detent, the knife just pops out. And so I noticed this, and I've had this knife for a while, and I thought, well, this is probably just like a really good production model, and I just happened to get lucky. But then I recently got in this knife, the Skyline Blue G10. Let's see if I can get this thing to focus. The Blue G10 Blackwash Edition. And I had a Skyline before, and the flipping action was okay, but it certainly wasn't a wrist-free flipping action. You had to put a little bit of a wrist flick into it. So there you can see that. There is no wrist flick required whatsoever. This knife deploys each and every time with a great deal of ease. So you compare these knives, which are both relatively inexpensive. I think this is like an $80 knife at retail, and the McGinnis Tuition is probably a $30 knife at retail, to a knife like this. And this is the Hinderer XM18 3-inch. This is a really expensive knife. Even at cost from Rick, it's almost $400. On the secondary market, it's much more expensive. And this is one of the knives that people look to when they talk about titanium frame lock flippers. And what I wanted to show you, and this is a really good flipping version of the Hinderer folder, but as most people know, the Hinderer is not the best flipper in the world. Basically the same amount of force, preload your finger, same amount of force, and it's very slow. The lockup lacks the certain click and authority that something like the Tuition has. I mean, the Tuition just snaps into place. And you talk to a lot of people and they're like, well, the Hinderer is not designed to be a flipper. It's just, it's a safety mechanism. You have to put in a little wrist flick to make it work. But by and large, I think that the Hinderer flipping action is really quite poor. There are a lot of other things about this knife that are nice, but the flipping action ain't one of them. So you go from that knife to this knife, which is a much less expensive, but still more expensive than the Kershaw and the Tuition flipper. This is the Browse Bionic, and here the flipper is on bearings. And it fires very smoothly, with not a whole lot of effort. No wrist flick is required. But it's not as fast as the Tuition or the Skyline. This knife has really excellent centering. I mean, it's just the fit and finish and tolerances on this knife are out of control good. So, comparing this knife to the Hinderer, it's a better flipper as well. There's very little rock when the knife is in the blade play position, or when the knife is in the closed position. A lot of what you'll find on flippers is that you'll get the knife sort of moving up and down. The blade will kind of move up and down as the ball bearing moves around in the detent. Here you get none of that. That's it. It's the only sort of movement that you get. It only opens or closes. And then this is a flipper designed by Charles Gudradis. This is the small Pathfinder flipper. And this knife has an incredibly good action. It's not faster or smoother than the CRKT Tuition, But what it does have is it has zero movement at all. I mean, there is nothing going on here. You have the knife, and it's either locked in the detent position or it's open. And that's it. And I think that a lot of the people that are online really love the flipping action because it's fun to play with, because it's easy to deploy the knife, because it allows for a much cleaner blade. I mean, look, there's no thumb studs, there's no holes, there's no stop pins. This is just a very clean design. But I think that one of the things that they're doing that's maybe not, it's not wrong, but it's just kind of silly, is they're emphasizing how smooth the flipping action is. Because I found that, especially here recently, the quality of flipping action on production folders, like this one, has gone so far up that they're virtually indistinguishable in performance between this and a nice flipper. I mean, I've handled very, very expensive flippers. I've handled $3,000 flippers at knife shows, and the action is not easier, nor is it smoother or faster than you can find on a production knife. The one thing that I will say that does differentiate really good custom flippers from production flippers is how much they rock in the detent position. A lot of the production knives, because the tolerances aren't really dialed in on the ball bearing and the detent fit, you'll get a little bit of wiggle in the detent position. And so I think that one of the things that people should do when they're evaluating a flipper is they should not really focus so much on how smooth or fast it is, because really just about everyone can make a smooth and fast flipper almost at any budget. I mean, I've had the Kershaw Chill, and that knife is just incredibly fast and smooth, and it's it's about $20. So I think that one of the things that the flipper cognoscenti should start looking at is how stable the knife is in this detent position, because what you don't want is you don't want the blade to wiggle around and then accidentally misfire. And so if it's a really locked in detent, and by that I don't mean that the detent is really hard. Like, the detent on this knife is not terribly hard. It doesn't take a lot of force to overcome it. But what the detent is it's very tightly matched up with the ball bearing. So you get no movement until you decide to deploy the knife, and that's it. I was trying to see if I could get it to half deploy there. There we go. And so that's, that's just enough force to open the knife. But there's no sort of wiggle while the knife is in the, see there again, I can't get it to do it. There's no wiggle here when the knife is in the detent position. And if you compare that with what I think is a pretty poor flipper, the Hinderer, you get a little bit of wiggle there. I mean, you can kind of, there we go. It should be closed or open and nothing in the middle. And I think that a lot of people evaluating flippers, especially on YouTube, they're not paying attention to that, and they're just flipping the knife open and closed. Oh, this is really smooth, but every single one of these knives, basically regardless of price, can be made smooth. And so there you have it. There's a little commentary on the status or the state and quality of flippers today in the knife market.